Welcome again to Financial Fitness with Patrick. As always, your host, Patrick, presented by Soaring Prophets. And folks, thank you so much. What a week. We just finished off the Nvidia earnings a few hours ago here now, Tuesday afternoon. This will go out live tomorrow on Wednesday. But we've got a little bit of a crack in your AI theory and your AI story. Now, there's a number of different things that's going on in the world right now. The market is overrun. We've seen a massive pop over the last little while here in the NASDAQ and the QQQ. But today's earnings, Nvidia killed it. They absolutely demonstrated that they are going to be a powerhouse to go. We saw a 20% growth. We're looking at 70% year over year. This should have been a knockout of the park home run earnings process for Nvidia today. But we see them down almost 2.5% today. That's a lot. Why? Well, we're going to dive into the charts here in a second, but there's some things that are going on in the Nvidia world that are eking and irking into the overall stock market picture. And one of the big ones is China. So we've talked a great deal before in regards to what China is going to be, how they're moving forward, and what's next for China. And first and foremost, I want everyone to understand is that China is going through the absolute astonishing growth of the middle class over the last 20 years, right? So China goes from, sustainable farming, agriculture, they're just feeding their people, to now they are the warehouse of the world. They are the manufacturers and shipping hub of the world. Well, during COVID, we find ourselves in a situation where China shuts down, right? Their government implodes around them, shuts down the entire community, and really restricts the processes that made China what China is. Well, what happened? We saw North American companies say, hey, listen, we need to onshore our manufacturing because we can't trust China anymore, right? So we've got the Chinese Communist Party now this week coming in meeting in San Francisco with President Biden, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. And we saw a pomp and circumstance, a show. Everyone was out in full flush to make sure that President Xi, not Kim Jong-un, President Xi was well received, and hey, we're still good with America. And then as soon as he leaves, Joe Biden turns around and calls him a dictator. China is going to become a problem. There's a number of different reasons why. Speaking to Nvidia is a chip stock. Everyone knows this. They make semiconductors. They are going to be the new era of AI. Is AI going to be today what it's going to be in 10 years? Absolutely not. 10 years is going to be a huge process, and people are trying to position themselves accordingly. The issue is that they've run up so much. We have a problem with now where we're geopolitically kind of looking across the bridge at China going, are you going to be a combatant over Taiwan? President Biden's administration has sanctioned the chips that are going to be able to be accessed by China. Nvidia has just come out and said that is going to represent an almost 30% stake of their current market. They're coming out and saying that, yes, absolutely, we are going to be able to make that up in other areas. We're going to be able to see growth in North America and in Europe. But folks, 30%. So what does China do? China finds himself in kind of a precarious situation where their demographics are inverting, right? So they're having less and less and less and less children. We've talked about some of this before, but they're not having the consumption that most demographics are, right? Demographics should look like this. You'd have lots of babies, and as people get older, there's less and less and less. Well, in China, that looks like this, right? We have no babies and then lots of old people. The issue that we're finding here right now is that we have a booming middle class in China because the manufacturing has went that way. But the wages that made China very competitive on the world market are no longer competitive. Like manufacturing, we can go to Mexico, we can go to El Salvador, we can go to South American countries that are safe. And that kind of comes in with a relative term because there's going to be dangers. You have cartels, you have all sorts of different things. But you can go into these communities and you can build out your manufacturing, onshoring it to North America for a fraction of the cost of what it was for China. So what is China's point of differentiation? What's their value add? What do they bring to the table right now? We're going to see. China is at a pivotal place in their time. They took on the Belt and Road Initiative where they were going out and they were driving economic development in numbers of nations where they would come in, they would build infrastructure, they would build dams, they would build roadways, they would build sports stadiums in your nation. Well, Sri Lanka, which, is this impoverished, developing nation, took a multi-lane highway. They had sports complex built, and they have no way of using it. They don't have the wealth and the population to pay back. So what do we see? We see Sri Lanka under these extreme pressures. China has debt defaulting all over the world that is owed to it. What does that mean? What did they do next? So again, we see, folks, a lot of pressure and geopolitical strife in China. We're seeing structures around what is going to be allowed from the Biden administration and North American pressure on China. China is at this pivotal point. So how does that affect Nvidia? Nvidia chips are used for artificial intelligence. They're used for military components. They're used for gaming. They are going to be the pinnacle of the gaming and technology chips. And what we're seeing now is that they're being used in farms in regards to AI outsourcing. So every company, every organization wants to have their own chat GPT. They want to have a chat bot. They want to have some sort of artificial intelligence that is wrapped into and amalgamated within their organization. And you see companies like Adobe. So Adobe has a number of different products. They have Photoshop. They have all these sorts of different things. And what they're doing is they're bringing in where you can take a picture and you can take the globe and you can spin it. And artificial intelligence will change the dynamics of that because it's able to render what a spinning globe would look like, right? So artificial and generative AI, which is the really interesting aspect, at a consumer level is really not going to be very profitable. It's at the commercial level. It's at the higher level where you're going to see massive infrastructure spend. And this is what Nvidia is really counting on at the high level for these spends. So what's that mean? It means that their chips right now, with chip shortages, goes back to what we had with China. When we had chip shortages and commodity shortages all around the world for the last 3 or 4 years, Nvidia has been able to ratchet up their pricing. They could ask for whatever they wanted because people were desperate to get into the AI game. They need to do it. It was literally, it has ran the market up for the last 1.5 to 2 years. AI, you say AI, and it was selling whatever you were selling, it was selling it. We had Chipotle talking about artificial intelligence in their ordering processes. We had Airbnb. Somehow that was going to become AI. And we saw these rocket ship up in stock prices. But are they real? Are they real valuations? Does it have legs? Will it stick? And that's where we are today. Today, Nvidia should be rocket shipping because they have pricing power. They can some of their chips are $40,000 and $50,000 for these servers that they're building it, right? They have pricing power, but Microsoft is coming. These other manufacturers are coming for them. Nvidia is only a designer, right? They ship out their manufacturing to Taiwan Semiconductor, which ironically is in Taiwan, which China wants. Does this become a geopolitical conflict? There is so much to unpack that's going on today with earnings, but we see Nvidia down almost 2%. Tomorrow will be very interesting. Is this going to be a buy the dip opportunity, or is this going to be the chink in the armor where we do see the entire sector pull back? All of these other NASDAQ affiliated sectors, Microsoft, you have, for a lack of a better term, you have Tesla, you have Facebook, Meta, Palantir, you have all of these AI driven companies that are kind of looking around right now and like, well, they killed it. Why isn't the stock up 10 or 15 or 20%? There's some hesitancy. People are thinking, is this real? What's going next? How high do we let this run? We need to have that pullback. We need to de-risk. And I think that goes great into our next guest. We have Theo Powell joining us today, and it's a pleasure to have you, pal. Folks, welcome to Financial Fitness with Patrick, presented by Soaring Prophets. And today, as always, a fantastic guest. All the way from Illinois, I'm joined by Theo Powell, Masters of Business of New York Life Securities LLC. Theo, he's been in the business for a number of years now, helping people create generate, and retain their wealth. We're going to talk about a few things here. The first and foremost, I want to talk about the insurance-based business. I think not enough of us know exactly how we can leverage insurance, creating that kind of infinite money loop that a lot of people are talking around in the social media world. I'm sure Theo will have some things to say about that, but also understanding risk. And I think that's a big portion. James, if you could pop up Theo. There you go. Theo, how are you doing, pal?
I'm good. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure, sir. Theo, obviously, when we talk about the market, the changes, everything that's going on, risk is a big deal. So you have a strong focus on insurance as a tool for managing financial risk. Perhaps maybe you can elaborate on how individuals and families can effectively use insurance as part of their broader financial planning strategy.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the big things about insurance is you hear people talk about term insurance. That's what everyone is very, I would say aware about, right? If something happens to them, it's going to pay their family out. It's going to help them, replace income, do different things like that. So that's what we always say. That's like you're renting your insurance, right? You're paying a much lower rate, and you're able to rent it. And if something happens, it's going to pay out for your family. However, we have whole life insurance, which I think is going to be very beneficial for a lot of people, but a lot of people don't know about it because it's not first and foremost, right? Like you said before, everyone wants to be in the market, right? The market is like the sexy thing, buying properties, different things like that. That's what people want to do. But with the whole life option, what you're doing is basically, again, comparing it to things that people know, that's more like you're buying your house, right? So when you buy your house, eventually you get some equity into your house, and then maybe you can sell it to get another property. You could do different things. So this bank on whole life is going to be something similar where you're buying, it's less about the face amount of the policy, and it's more about accumulating cash value within the policy over time. Should it be the main focus of your portfolio? No, but it definitely can be in there because it's a great way for you to leverage your money. And by that I mean, as the policy grows over time with the cash value and everything like that, you can borrow from yourself if you want to. You can borrow from yourself tax free, which is nice, right? So if you want to pay yourself back, you can, but you don't feel obligated to do so. So that money that you're building within your own policy is like building your own bank account that you can use, and that's going to grow over time thanks to the dividends that get added into the policy over time. So it's not one of those things where it's not a short-term investment. It's definitely a longer-term investment where you want to take your time and realize that this is something that's going to help me later in life. It's not, the next 2 years I'm going to use this. This is going to be more like, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, depending on how much you're putting into the policy.
So Theo, a couple great areas to kind of pick up from there. So the difference between term and whole life. Term, I think, like you're saying, is that tends to be the rental, right? Accidental, something happens to you, your family's going to get, your funeral covered, you're going to get some of your bills taken care of. It might cover a mortgage. We see a lot of our mortgages in Canada being insured so that, we have these insurance policies on the back end. Why would someone like myself, or maybe a better example of this would be my daughter. I have a 14-year-old daughter. Why, when she turns 18 years old, what is a whole life policy for an 18-year-old who's healthy, happy, all of those things? How can it be used to generate wealth for her? What does it look like putting money into that as far as a father? And how can I use that to maybe leverage into situations where she can 10 years down the road buy her first home fairly affordably without being into the situation now where so many children are coming into the labor force and not being able to purchase real estate?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so the younger they start, obviously the younger they are, the healthier they are. So that's going to be a big leg up as far as when you're putting money into the policy, you have less money going to the cost of insurance and more money going to cash value, which is so super important, especially if you're going to use this for, what we call life's opportunities moving forward. So that's why when they're younger, we would prefer people who are younger to invest in these policies because they're giving themselves options over time, which is so super important. Like you said, like when you're 18, you're not able to, most 18-year-olds, I should say, are not able to, invest in a house or invest in a property right away. This is a great way to get them started on the right track. So that way they can make decisions that are not just completely based off the market. It's a little bit safer. And it's a great way just to kind of dip your foot into investing in yourself, investing in different opportunities for yourself as well. So like I said, the younger they are, the more opportunities they're going to give themselves later in life. So, someone who's, 16, 18, 20 years old, when they're ready to buy a house, they have options for that down payment. Or, if they decide to have children later in life, they have options to help their student, pay for schools. Or even further down the road, when they're getting ready to look at retirement, they can look and say, okay, I have this dollar amount within my policy. I can use this to supplement, my retirement account. I can use this to supplement one of my investments or, public programs, whatever it happens to be. You're just giving yourself more options and more opportunities.
So Theo, one of the situations that I'm currently working on, again, I've got a few years. My daughter just started high school, so she's a freshman. My financial planning to pay for her college is why do I want to pay a college or university out of my pocket in cash? Right? That's a loss of value for me. I'm going to end up paying, $50, $60, $70,000 for a Canadian university. Hopefully she doesn't go down to the States. You guys can really rack up the bills down there for her. So why do I want to use a tool like that? My current plan is to go purchase a property for my daughter. Hopefully that the economic landscape continues that we've been having with, especially here in Canadian real estate. We've kind of worked ourselves into a bubble here. We'll call it that. But we're having, 10, 15% increases in real estate values year over year over year, where our last 15 to 20 year valuations have been 6+% a year on real estate. My daughter decides to go to the University of Toronto. She goes to Kingston, goes to Queen's University, a couple prestigious universities. Why shouldn't I go out and maybe buy a house in that community, hold it for 4 or 5 years, take that $1 million property, take my 6% a year off of it? What are some of the benefits of going into a policy like yourself, putting in a cash deposit for my daughter and letting her kind of run with that, garnering the dividend like you're saying? What are some pros and cons in that kind of different scenario? And what would it allow her longer term as opposed to selling it, capital gains once we sell? What are some of the pros and cons of each of those scenarios?
Sure, absolutely. So as far as, in a perfect world, you're able to do both, right? Like you're able to maybe look at a property and you're able to look at, a life insurance policy, because again, we're hitting on two sides of the market. So in an ideal world, you're able to do both, which is fine. But if we're looking at it just strictly from the life insurance side of things, the biggest thing is it's going to be the withdrawals will be tax free, which is huge, right? So you don't have to worry about paying the tax man when you're taking that money out. If you're borrowing money from a bank, typically you have to do, like credit checks, background checks, things like that. If you accumulate enough money in this policy, you don't have to worry about any of those things. You're literally borrowing money from yourself. And like I said, you're borrowing your money from yourself at a much lower rate. You don't have to pay yourself back if you don't want to. With a bank, obviously, as soon as you take that money out, usually 60, 90 days later, they're like, okay, I'd like to have my first, payment back, things like that, right? So with this policy, like I said, it's more about just giving yourself the option to do whatever it is that you want to do. Like I said, perfect world, you're able to do both the property and the investment. Whereas like an investment in life insurance. So, like I said, being able to do both is nice. But if we're looking at something that we're going to use to pay out at the end of the day, we want to do something that's also a bit more guaranteed as well too. So like the growth within a life insurance policy is, I can't say it's guaranteed, but it's pretty close to that. You're going to see gains in that policy every single year once you get past that first year or so, right? First year, I always tell people is not great, but after that, you're going to slowly start to see gains in the policy and give yourself options.
So
With
now,
the
Theo,
property,
is that because these policies are amortized? Is that how they kind of roll that, or why can we say that? Obviously, we're not guaranteeing anything, but why can we say that what are they pegged to that is providing them a return?
Sure. So it's the dividends within the policy. So New York Life, we have one of the strongest dividends within the United States. And what I mean by that is when we're not on like the smart stock market. You can't go buy New York Life stock. So when you buy a New York Life whole life policy, you become, a stockholder, more or less, quote unquote, right? So when we have gains and we have dividends, as opposed to, saying, we're going to give it to all of our, equity holders and things like that, we're putting that money back into our whole life policies. Like we just announced last week that we're paying out $2.2 billion in dividends to all of our different policy holders, right? So that's money that's going to go back into their pocket. So that's why the longer you can hang on to these things, the bigger that dividend gets, because we're doing it based off the cash value that's in that policy. So, if you have $100 in there, it's going to grow by a certain amount. But if you have $1,000 in there, it's going to grow by a certain amount. So it's really just based off of, how much cash value you have within the policy.
So again, as a father, I use my daughter in a lot of financial planning situations because again, it's where I'm at right now. So
Sure.
in a situation for her, let's say, 18 years old, it gives us a round number, everyone's taxable at that age. But what sort of benefit am I to be able to come in fairly cash heavy establish something for her where she's not going monthly to it, where she's not contributing at a high dollar value monthly. As soon as that money hits that account, please correct me if I'm wrong, is she able to utilize that money immediately? If I put $200,000 into a whole life policy for her when she turns 18 years old, she's then able to borrow off that 200,000, correct?
So it depends on how we set it up, right? So it's you're kind of right, kind of not. I know that's not the best way to put it, but yeah. So it depends on how we set up how we set up the policy. Like we can set it up where you are putting in a certain amount of money up front and just letting the policy kind of pay for itself over time while also building the cash value and also gaining a little bit more extra interest into the policy. So that's
Right.
one way that you can look at it. Or like if you're saying we're going to do $200 a month and we're going to do it for 10 to 15 years, and then at the end of that 15 years, she wants to be able to pull money out of it that way as well. So it really just depends on how you want to set up the policy long term. That's really what it comes down to. So we can set up a lot of different ways. So to answer your question, it's a yes and no. It just depends on how we decide to set it up after conversations and things like that.
Cool. So when we hear, people talking about this, infinite money loop, that people are using insurance to generate that, can you maybe talk a little bit about that? What does that entail? How can you leverage it? And what are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the risks?
So, I mean, I'll start with the risk first. I mean, the number one risk usually is going to be just because, especially in the States, inflation is so high, right? So, usually, when you see those gains in the dividends and the cash value account, it's between 5.5% for New York Life. But if inflation's obviously at 7, 8, 9%, you're still losing purchasing power, long term. Which so I would say like it's nice to have it a part of your portfolio. It shouldn't be the entire thing of your portfolio because we want to make sure that we keep pace with inflation. So that's probably the biggest downside as far as creating
So,
that.
Leo, are those terms locked in at signing? Like right now,
The
again, we talk a lot about on financial fitness about the bond markets and the rates that are out there right now. And we've just come off the 5%, 10-year bond note. If you're buying term life insurance now, potentially these are some of the highest rates you'll be receiving, or are they fluctuating with the bond market as well? How does that work?
So I mean, it fluctuates with a lot of different things. So for us specifically, New York Life, so it's going to be partly some of our investments as a company that'll be determining. Economic factors are going to be determining. Interest rates are going to be determining. So again, not to like sidestep your question, but I mean, it's really
Right.
there's a lot of different factors. So while
Sure.
I can't say that it's guaranteed every single year, we've paid our dividend pretty much every single year. In the 177 years of the company, we've paid it out every year except for one, I think, and that was in the 1800s. So we've always paid back those dividends. And you think about like the global pandemic we've been through, the crisis in
Yeah.
2008, like New York Life was still paying out those dividends on a yearly basis. So like this is what our company is based off of. So this is going to be our first priority, moving forward and things like that. So like I said, while people, I can't guarantee it, I feel good about saying yes, you're going to see some dividends within your policy moving forward.
Absolutely. So again, the primary mechanism here is people being able to have that low risk mechanism, but also the tax savings. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're able to shelter your money from the tax man? So I'm going to tell you right now, every year, I hate the spring because all of a sudden I'm sitting in the office with my accountant going, "Don't tell me that."
Yeah.
And how are we sheltering our money from taxes here? Obviously, not evading or avoiding, but
Mhm.
sheltering in a better way so that we can be a little less empty at the end of the. And what do you guys have? March? What is it?
Yeah.
March down there for tax season?
Yeah, April 15th. Yeah, April
There you go.
15th is tax day. So as far as the policy goes, so there's basically what happens is obviously you put the money in as long as it's inside of a life insurance policy. There are still parameters that are in place. We call it's a modified endowment contract. So if you exceed those numbers, then your withdrawal will be a taxable event. However, what we do, our job at New York Life is to make sure that you're not affected by that. So like the example I always use is like, Bill Gates can't get, a $10,000 policy and then put $20 million in it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't work that way. So it's got to be relative for everything. So
Yeah.
so you can put money in. We want to make sure that it's gonna grow over time. But then if you need to take money out, it's going to be it's going to be a non-taxable event each time you take that to look at on the front end. That's not based off our client. That's off of us making sure that it's going to be beneficial for them when they're ready to start withdrawing money.
I think it's fantastic. And, folks, as we've been talking about here for the last number of months, we're walking into an economic climate that is a little bit uncertain. You know, we've looked at the NASDAQ, we follow the QQQs when we're charting, and we're seeing, you know, this rally through here to the end of the year, the Santa rally, traditionally, as we call it. But we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. We've got an AI situation where some of the CEOs of these companies are getting pushed around. There's a lot of uncertainty that's going on. We've fallen off, you know, the 5% 10-year note here in the last 2 weeks after Powell had his conversation. But there's so much risk in the market. And what Theo does and the products that he's offering is lowering that risk. It's taking that boot off your throat, letting you be able to sleep at night while your money is safe and being kept warm by the folks at his office. Theo, can you tell us a little bit how to get in contact with you and maybe a little bit more about your organization? And then we'll wrap her up, pal.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting in contact with me is pretty easy. I mean, obviously you can find me on LinkedIn, just Theo Powell on LinkedIn. My email address is tjpowell01@ft.newyorklife.com. You know, more than happy to answer questions and just, you know, just help educate people. Like that's my biggest goal, and my role is to make sure that people feel good about whatever decision that they're making, whether it's, you know, life insurance or investments, annuities, whatever it happens to be. I want them to feel comfortable with whatever decision they make. So if they just have general questions that they want me to answer, I'm more than happy to do that. And like I said before, New York Life, we're, you know, the #1 mutual insurer in the United States. We've been around for 177 years, you know, and we're not going anywhere. So obviously, when people give you their money or they want to work with you with their money, you want to know they're going to be with a company that's going to be around for a long time. And that's the one thing that New York Life has done, is we've been around for a long, long time.
Absolutely. And that tradition, you know, we talk about some of these organizations, and we've come out of this era in the last 5 years or so, pandemic, all of the things that went along with that. But a lot of people started looking a little bit more closely at their wallet, their bottom line, the returns that they were garnering. And when you see someone that's been in the business as long as your organization has, and someone like yourself who's here having the conversations, working on education, right? That is the #1 lacking issue. And that's why Financial Fitness was born. Our whole goal, folks, is to get you in front of some of these top professionals. Theo comes highly recommended. This guy's been doing this for a number of years now, and he's making people money at the end of the day. Get in touch with him. He comes highly recommended for one of our good buddies out of the Walking Tall. So we appreciate those boys over there. As always, walk tall, folks. And from me, Financial Fitness and Soaring Profits, we've got a number of amazing things that are in the works right now. You're going to have to stick around. But myself and James, we just hit 1,000 subscribers. So it was kind of a big celebration for us over the last 24 hours here. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank Theo again. Thank you so much, pal, for coming today. It was a pleasure. Your information is really, it's so helpful when you kind of dig and dive into where people are struggling. And as we move into kind of uncertain financial times, having that education, having someone they can reach out to that's, you know, it's not a pushy sales call. It's not a beat you over the head. You got to buy, you got to buy. You know, you're a gentleman, you're a scholar, and I appreciate you, pal. From me, folks, from James, let's make some money together, guys.